The civil rights movement was a very American movement. And unfortunately, some people see that as a black movement, and some people see it as simply a racial justice movement. But the civil rights movement was as American as apple pie is. This whole idea of standing up and being your friend, being an advocate, and that's what, of course, Selma was all about. That after that awful thing that happened on that Bloody Sunday, people were beaten. Dr. King put out the message through the National Council of Churches that we would like, particularly for clergy and religious types, to come. And so we flooded in here on that Tuesday. We're exercising the freedoms that are writ large in our documents. The freedom of speech, the freedom of protest, the freedom of assembly, and doing it nonviolently.
It was the same areas of our country. It was South Carolina, it was Alabama, it was Florida, it was Mississippi, it was Texas, that were anti-black, and then they were anti-female, and then they were anti-gay. But it's part of the psyche of human beings that we have to have a victim. And finally there comes a time when the victim says, I will not be victimized anymore. People don't give up their power. Power has to be taken away from them. But when black people say, I'm not going to be abused anymore, they have to give up power. And when women say, I won't be trampled on anymore, when gay people said, I'm not going to be abused anymore, that's the beginning of an act of independence.
Stonewall was a natural explosion of rage that had been building for many decades, and that showed a change in how people felt about themselves. That they felt that these conditions were no longer acceptable, and they expressed that.
Stonewall, what is it? It's a bar. Like, what's the big deal? At one level, but the other level is the fact that it has been remembered in a way, and it's been mythologized in a way, that it stands in for a lot of other things.
The younger generation had no idea the history of this place, that we went to jail to make sure they have a place to dance at. They think there were lighting and crystal balls and all the time. No, it wasn't. Every gay bar, the windows were painted black.
When you hear people talk about Stonewall, you see it as being a white gay phenomenon in our community where these white gay men did all of this fighting back. But some of the first retaliation came from Black and Latino drag queens and lesbians because they got tired of it.
What is it about we as human beings that we've worked through issues of race, issues of gender, but still then there's the issue of sexual orientation. Where are the intersections, and what do we need to talk about?
Race is still the festering sore in American society. I think what's frightening at the moment is that it's gone subterranean. We're not talking about it in the ways that we were during the civil rights movement of the 60s. And in some ways it's harder to get at, it's harder to point out, and for those who enjoy white privilege, it's easier to ignore.
This is a kind of difficult issue for African American leaders and gay leaders to discuss. There's some unique fundamental dynamics that tie us together, whether we like it or not. So a lot of us who grew up in the civil rights movement, come out of the struggle for justice, understand that until our brothers and sisters in the gay community can feel safe to be who they are, none of us can be safe.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Bennett, and I'm the producer of the documentary From Selma to Stonewall. It's the story of a black, straight, retired preacher and civil rights foot soldier, Gil Caldwell, and me, a white lesbian, national organizer, activist, and author. The gay rights movement has often been referred to as the new civil rights movement of today. We weren't sure that was entirely true, so we decided to go to sites significant to both movements to find out. Everywhere we've gone, we've talked to people about the intersection of racism, sexual orientation, gender identity, and religion, and asked if they thought the two movements were the same. We've gathered stories of civil rights and Stonewall veterans, activists of all stripes, people on the street, religious leaders, and scholars. Gil and I were willing to ask each other the awkward, possibly offensive questions as we figured out how to find common ground. We took this conversation to the streets, and now we are ready to share it with you. Give today and you'll receive some pretty cool stuff, but more importantly, you'll be part of a larger movement to bring about positive change in the world. We need to raise every dollar of our goal to receive the funding. Please share our story and help us complete From Selma to Stonewall. Thank you.